other things. As the director pointed out, he said, just like a good personal trainer, we want robots to be able to guide the children toward a behavior that we desire, Who would that we be? Would that be the parents or would that be the government? Of course, they say the need for this technology is driven by, and this is another quote from their study, driven by critical societal problems that require sustained, personalized support, supplementing the efforts of educators, parents, and clinicians. See where they put parents in there? They're kind of sandwiched in between the government school teachers and the psychiatrists they put in. They say they want to build a healthy relationship of trust and respect between the child and the robot, and of course between the government that is supplying and programming that robot as well. Now, they had a close call at the Senate today. You know, we all know how difficult it is to delouse Congress. Well, we got an example of that. The Senate undergoes an emergency cleaning after a woman drags in bed bugs. This is a woman who, I guess you could say she was attempting to bug the Senate, but she was standing in line, and people in line to get into the Senate saw bugs physically climbing over this woman. They alerted people, and they went into lockdown. As they said, we've been on high alert all day for these creatures. People are pretty much on lockdown, and they're scared to leave their offices. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that they're not that scared about disease and pestilence coming across the border, even though we've had a lot of reports of that by border agents. We keep seeing the government, as well as the mainstream media that is controlled by the government or working with the government, telling us it's not really anything that we need to worry about. Wouldn't they be as concerned, or shouldn't they be as concerned, if it was a real bug? You know, not just, we joked about bugging the Senate. Well, what about bugging you? What about putting electronic bugs on it? Shouldn't you react that way? Shouldn't you go into lockdown? Shouldn't you panic to try to get rid of those? Because it is very difficult to get rid of those types of things, the kind of police state surveillance, the kind of tyranny that we see. That's just as difficult to get rid of as bed bugs once it gets established in an area. Now, we also see in another story today from on INFOWARS.com, Steve Watson reports a leaked document shows that facts and evidence are not considered when adding Americans to a terror watch list. He says a newly leaked government document reveals that agencies like the NSA, CIA, FBI do not require or seek, quote, concrete facts, unquote, or irrefutable evidence, unquote, that someone is a terrorist before adding them to official watch lists. This is a document that was made public by the website that Glenn Greenwald has created, The Intercept. And they say this effectively gives single federal officials the unilateral authority to flag entire categories of people that the government is tracking onto special elevated watch lists for extra security. The power to carry this action out is vested in the assistant to the president for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. And they point out this is a position that is not require Senate confirmation. This is very devastating to be put on a watch list. Of course, one of the first things that we did when I came here to InfoWars, one of the first stories that I covered was Wade Hicks, who was stranded in Hawaii as he was trying to travel to Japan. And we covered that story in depth. He was put on the watch list, on the no-fly list, and there was never any explanation given as to why he was put on that list. He was never told that he was taken off of the list. He was merely told that he could fly again after being stranded in Hawaii. And of course, he had been vetted by the TSA. He had also was flying on a military plane to go see his wife in Japan. And this happens to people all the time. Children are put on the list. Many times people who are trying to get a home, if they find out that they're on a no-fly list, they will not be allowed to actually go through and get a loan. That's what I was told when I was getting my home loan by the loan originator, that they had, only time they had ever had to drop anybody was when they found that they were on the no-fly list. And he said, it's very frustrating for the guy because he couldn't figure out why he was on there and he couldn't get any response. That's exactly the problem. They never tell you why you're put on. They won't tell you if you're taken off. And of course, as we now know, they can put people on for any reason or no reason at all. Now, another story that came out today as the fundraiser-in-chief was traveling through California was that a woman in labor was being held up by the police as they blocked off the road. She could not cross a street to get to the hospital, and people were saying that she was in labor. This was the top of Drudge today. Now, witnesses said that the woman who was sitting at a bus stop bench across from the hospital appeared to be in labor, But sources told NBC News on Thursday that the woman didn't tell officers she was in labor and did not request medical attention. Not that it would have done her much good. Listen to what the officer said when the NBC reporter went over and got this video on his phone.
Sergeant, can you tell me what's going to happen with the pregnant lady across the street?
As soon as we can. Looks like the motorcade's coming through right about now, so we'll be able to open it up for traffic. And first thing we'll try to get through will be an ambulance, but I can't guarantee.
Now, did you catch that? He said, we'll try to do what we can, but we can't guarantee it. Callous disregard for the citizens of the town as the fundraiser in chief is going by. Of course, it's the emperor that's important. The rest of us are just serfs to be cast to the side. At least one city, as reported yesterday, has had enough. Obama has gone there for several times for fundraisers, and they said, we're not going to pay the security bill anymore. Now, of course, one of the ways that politicians do fundraising is by selling their books. That's what Hillary Clinton is doing right now. Now, Paul Ryan, one of the leaders of the GOP, wanted to do the same thing, but he requested permission from the FEC, from the Federal Elections Commission. He asked them for permission back on July 3rd if he could buy his own book. They reported U.S. Representative Paul Ryan is asking the FEC for permission to buy his own book with his campaign funds. They want to use the campaign funds and PAC funds to purchase copies of the book from the publisher in bulk and distribute the work to supporters and contributors according to the request. Now, what happened today was the FEC came back and they said basically he could do that, but they put some arbitrary restrictions on him. To which the Republican chair of the Federal Elections Commission said, this is a very, very dangerous precedent. And of course, now this story today from Communities Digital News said, caught in the act, FEC will hobble the sales of the new Paul Ryan book. And they point out that Democrats on the FEC, and of course it's split, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, the chair is a Republican, but the Democrats managed to get a 4th vote, and they imposed restrictions on Paul Ryan's publisher regarding promotion and sale of his upcoming book. Now, the current chair, Republican Lee Goodman, said he wanted the FEC to affirm that the book and its publishers are exempt from FEC regulation under what's known as the media exemption. The same exemption that typically lets newspaper editorials, television channels, and other outlets say whatever they want about political figures without worrying about campaign finance laws. Do you think that might be important, that we could say whatever we want to in the press in terms of covering political candidates? That is the essence of the First Amendment. The First Amendment was not there to merely protect our artistic freedom. It's really primarily there to protect our political freedom. It's there to recognize what we possess as human beings. As the Declaration of Independence pointed out, we possess these rights as human beings. We're endowed by our Creator with them. And these were prohibitions that were put on the federal government in the First Amendment, particularly political speech. But the interesting thing about this is that even though he's speaking out against this, he voted for it. It passed 6-0. Now, in other analysis of this, they said that the FEC Commissioner, Ellen Weintraub, also ruled that while Ryan can have his campaign and PAC buy the books to give out, the promotion on his websites had to be limited to just 2 sentences. And they went on to ask, they said, there haven't been any restrictions put on Hillary Clinton's book promotion, nor have the Clintons' online promotional efforts for the book been limited to just 2 sentences, which is clearly an arbitrary number. This is the dangerous thing, and this shows how dangerous the Republicans are, how spineless and cowardly they are when they go and ask for permission for something that is a fundamental right. They turn that into a privilege, not only for themselves, but for us. The Republicans in Congress, as well as the Democrats in Congress, have abdicated their authority as well as their responsibility to pass legislation. Now we have a situation in this country where over and over again we see these regulatory agencies, whether it's the IRS or the EPA or the FEC, constantly restricting our freedoms, constantly passing legislation, passing laws. They call them regulations. But of course, the Congress is not involving itself in most of that. They just create the agencies and let them go run roughshod over our rights. And that's what's happening here. When you ask them for permission, you are turning a fundamental right into a privilege. And of course, we can't expect them to get that back for us. Continuing on, another article today from the Examiner, the FCC chair warns of chilling regulations and a book ban on conservative publishers. Chairman Lee Goodman also says by failing to affirm this publisher's constitutional right, their statutory right to disseminate a political book free from conditions from the FEC and regulations from the FEC, we have effectively asserted regulatory jurisdiction over a book publisher. And that's exactly what happened. And of course, Representative Ryan begged them for that. Now, how do we take this back? Well, one of the things that's happening, of course, is we need to take back our press freedoms. And of course, every time we go somewhere, we, as INFOWARS reporters, are typically not told about what's going on. When we find out that there is something that's going on and we try to show up with our press credentials, they typically turn us away because they know that they can get people who will toe the line for them. And now, even the mainstream press has had enough of this. We have an article from National Journal today written by Ron Fournier. He says, while White House reporters can reclaim their beat, he says, in almost every officially sanctioned exchange between reporters and the proverbial senior administration officials, quote unquote, it's conducted in the presence of a press staffer, even when the interview is, quote, on background, meaning that the source will not be identified by name. And of course, when they put these third-party minders in, it's there as a way to intimidate the government spokesman who is speaking, quote unquote, off the record. And we've seen this over and over again everywhere we go. It's not just high-ranking government spokesmen, it's everyone in government now will not talk. They're afraid for their jobs. They're afraid of the regulatory agencies. They're afraid of the White House, just like Paul Ryan. And that's how freedom dies. Now, to his credit, he's pointed out some things that the press needs to do in order to take back their freedoms. Listen to these 3 points he made. He said, 1, the White House is setting the ground rules by covering the president. Why? Good reporters control the terms of play. Number 2, many reporters operate under the assumption that they will need the cooperation of a PR spokesman more than the spokesman needs them. That's wrong. We can do our jobs without so-called flacks, and we do that here at INFOWARS without the PR spokesman. We don't need them. Many editors and reporters, the third point, are afraid to get beat on a story if they don't play by the PR rules. Flout their rules. Make them fear you. That's right. We don't play the access game. Once you begin to get worried that if you go beyond their restrictions, if you don't treat them in the manner that they want to be treated, if you don't just parrot back their press releases, you will not be given access in the future. That's why we're not given ready access. That's why they turn us away from press conferences. We don't play by the rules. We don't need their PR reports, even when they're willing to give it to us. When we went to Nevada, of course, the police department there, with all the publicity that was going on, even though CNN by that time and Fox News had turned up after a week of us covering it, they didn't even have a press report to give us. They just said, go away. Well, we don't need their press reports, and we're not interested in their press reports. Stay with us. Right after the break, we're going to go on location with Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs at the Arizona border.
Alex Jones here to break down some exciting developments in the area of research concerning supplemental iodine. It's nothing less than phenomenal. I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. And I used some of the mainline iodine supplements and they upset my stomach and I had some issues with it. Until I discovered a product being developed by Dr. Group, who I was already interviewing as an expert on my radio show, and I began taking the product before he actually rolled it out. You now know it as Survival Shield True Nascent Iodine that your body can really absorb. Then, about a year ago, he said, listen, if you think this is powerful, I'm going to come out with rare earth, deep earth crystals that are incredibly powerful that no one else has as a source for their iodine from between 7,000 and 12,000 feet, literally drilled out of the ground. You put it on a hot plate and it turns into the pure gas. No one else has 99.99% pure iodine. And the results that I personally have had have been life-changing. I was over 270 pounds. And with the iodine, exercise, and better diet, I have lost now more than 50 pounds total, and I'm continuing to lose the weight. I have more energy, my libido, all this crap came out of my skin. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. This is innovating. This is trailblazing. And the best part is it helps fund INFOWARS.com, the radio show, the TV show, the whole media operation promoting true libertarian ideas. For a limited time, experience the ancient